Greetings, nerds. Being a nerd, I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. Hope you're doing well.
Doing fine. I'm here. We're here. We have virtual Comic-Con coming.
Yeah, we do. Yeah,
whatever that is.
So this Saturday, July 11th, we are going to be doing a podcast marathon with the Indie PopCon. It's one of, as like just about every Comic-Con in 2020 is going virtual, and we were invited to participate. Our time, if you want to listen to us, is 6 p.m. Eastern time. So so we'll be doing a little live spot there. So come listen to us.
Yeah, so it can crash and burn.
No, I hope not. I'm gonna make sure my kids are off their like tablets and devices so that we don't have the same problem we had when we tried to do our live show a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that's a must. That's a must.
Yeah.
Speaking of live shows and recording, Hamilton the Musical dropped on Disney Plus, a live recording of the Broadway show that everyone's at least kind of heard the music to at this point. Now, I didn't watch it. Will, I know you did. What are your thoughts on it?
Watched it twice, and so here's the thing. I really came into this show. I mean, obviously, if you've been around the last since 2015, you've heard of Hamilton and the cultural phenomenon it is. I mean, it's won 11 Tony Awards, Pulitzer Prize, blah blah blah. But other than the reference, not going to throw away my shot. I really hadn't heard any songs or anything from the soundtrack, so I went into it honestly cold. And and every time I wanted to watch the musical when it's traveled here in North Carolina, and you can't get tickets. So props to Disney, props to Lynn to sell the rights to it and just make it accessible to everyone. So when it started, I was okay. I was like, I had like you. I had very high expectations and didn't want to be disappointed.
Right.
And I will say that it met my expectations.
Mm-hmm.
It really did, and it was just I could see why. From obviously this was a filmed version of the stage show, but that original cast they just killed it. And of course we've seen a lot of these folks, Leslie Odom now and other projects, and Debbie Diggs and Blackish and other things, but just seeing them when they were on the stage playing Aaron Burr and playing Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson and Lin-Manuel Miranda and Philippa Sue and Renee, the original cast, all of them just did a phenomenal job. And really, if you hadn't seen it, the King George, the actor Jonathan Goff, who plays Sam, just stole the show whenever King George showed up on the stage. So it truly is all it was what it's cracked up to be. At first, I was kind of like, when it first kind of got started, I was like, I'm not sure about this. But by the end, I was sold. I watched it again.
What did you think about Lin-Manuel Miranda's performance? Because what I find fascinating is for 5 years, I've heard nothing but accolades, and everyone rejoices him. He's such a genius and everything for what he did in this contribution. And now, since they dropped the film version, I've heard nothing but criticism about his actual portrayal of Alistair, which I think is hilarious.
I think it is too.
So funny. But what were your thoughts on it?
See, I've heard that buzz around a lot of the YouTube space, and also on Twitter. obviously Hamilton trended like pretty much all of 4th of July weekend.
Right.
And so, I thought his performance was good. I mean, given that he, the star power of, these other actors that were in the show, clearly many of them seasoned Broadway performers or stage performers. So, but I personally did not find his performance, I don't find that he was overshadowed by anyone. I thought he did a very, very solid performance, given that this was, obviously not his first craft.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he held his own with folks, and um, didn't I didn't have any issues with his performance. I really didn't. I mean, because with the pandemic and stuff, I've been watching, a few, I guess, and I guess April and May, Andrew Lloyd Webber had been putting his shows up on YouTube, so you can watch them. And there've been various film, everything from just really rough copies of stage shows that were put to film, made into film. And for me, so Hamilton, I haven't obviously seen it on the stage, but I have seen Les Mis on the stage. Les Mis translated to film was good, but it's still, it didn't blow me away like Hamilton did. So, obviously, I felt like I still had a theater performance, even though I was watching it in my living room, because you still had the audience in the background. You still, the way they did the shots very well, in that you still, obviously there are a lot of details that you were able to get in an motion picture, where they are having close-up shots that you wouldn't necessarily have, sitting in the upper balcony where I would be sitting, because tickets would be so damn expensive. But that being said, I still felt like I was still had somewhat of the theater experience at the way they shot the stage, and the way they really maximized in their camera angles how they use the stage, and the turntable, and how the actors would fly in and come out of scenes. And again, back to Lynn's performance, again, he played well off of the other actors, so I didn't find it diminished at all, even as far as my raw reaction when I was watching the show. And so, I mean, I've seen some of the criticism after the fact, at least as far as the performance, not getting into, the story and embellishments and all the other, criticisms that some people have had over the last week. That's been, I guess, amplified now, given that it's been brought to a wider audience. But I really enjoyed the show. And I mean, and clearly Disney Plus got the win. I mean, I saw where they had like a 72% like uptick in downloads for their service just in the United States, over just for this weekend, this past weekend, versus what they had for the preceding 4 weeks. So, I mean, clearly it was the event that Disney Plus hoped it would be, after what they needed, after Mandalorian has been gone for a few months. And so, with that, and also, again, just bringing theater and bringing this experience to just average folk who would never otherwise get this opportunity to see it. I mean, that was a big win, especially, and I'm glad they moved it up from October of next year to 4th of July weekend. So props to Disney Plus. I mean, it's a win-win for them. But
well, just to clarify, I don't think it's about people never being able to see Hamilton, because there's so many clips. There's so many schools now performing it. It's a musical. It's going to be out there. But the fact that it was the original cast, that's the beauty of it, is that there was this Broadway plays are a time capsule. Those actors don't continue doing the same role forever and ever and ever. And I think that there was something to be said about the casting, that they hit every single character so well, that that's part of the reason why it just took off the way it did. But this is really not a Hamilton podcast.
It's not, but yeah,
I haven't even seen the movie version.
You got to go see it. You got to check it out.
I don't have to.
You must. It's your appointment. It's your homework for the week.
I own the soundtrack. I know the songs. I get what happens.
Okay. Well, at least you had a soundtrack.
Speaking about events, let's talk about Doom Patrol. So Doom Patrol, Sex Patrol, whatever you want to call it, this week was interesting. Mm-hmm. As I try to remember what did happen. I don't know why this I'm trying to figure out in my head, how do I go from talking to Hamilton where Will spends 20 minutes and then into Sex Patrol? What is the segue for that? What is the segue? But Will, what did you think about Doom Patrol?
So, what did I think about Doom Patrol this week? So, whenever I heard the title of this week's episode 4, Sex Patrol, clearly it's Doom Patrol, and I know we say this all the time, but I was expecting what I thought the episode was going to be, and what actually ended up being was completely different.
Agreed.
So that was the big takeaway that I got for the episode this week. I loved the episode, but it was completely not what I expected how it was going to unfold.
Well, I expected more.
Yeah, that's the point.
Which is bizarre when that last sequence is a demon giving birth to a child that if it screams, it's the end of the world or there's no more sex. I got lost in all of that talk.
Yeah.
But
well, I think there would be no more children, but basically the world will just be one big orgy. Yeah. That's what I got from it. Yeah.
Well, innocence would be lost. And I think that's something that this episode did really well is even though it's called Sex Patrol, it's because of the innocence when you pass that rite of passage, lose your virginity, and it's really important. And this season, because of Dorothy, they're playing a lot into who they are as these new creatures or these heroes, but also D-list heroes.
Yeah.
Kind of the bottom of the barrel heroes. I love them, don't get me wrong, but they're misfits. And they're with Dorothy. I really appreciated how you saw everything through her eyes and the wanting to be at the party to see everything.
Yep.
Because she is over 100 years old technically, yet her father will never see her more than this 11-year-old girl.
Yep.
So I thought that was really good, and maybe that's why a lot of the over the top aspects of the story that plays out, it doesn't become a big orgy. Right. It just becomes a story with all of these connected pieces, and it's a reminder. I mean, there was some bizarre moments that happened in season 1, and oddly enough, those are never the moments that I really reflect on liking. Nope. I think about a lot of the character moments, and this episode, Cliff then kills me, where they hey, Cliff, you can't orgasm, so you go in. And he's like, well, thank you for embarrassing me in front of
exactly. Yeah. Or when the sex men say, everybody go, I'm Cyborg. The Cyborg's like, well, I'm Cyborg.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Wait.
Oh my God. What did you think about Cliff being on ecstasy?
Oh, so Cliff always delivers, whether it's high as a kite on X Cliff or angry Cliff. It was just, I was literally just falling out of my seat laughing whenever Whenever first when the Chief and Cliff have that moment, because again, their relationship is just one that is such love hate, or hate, or I don't, and and so the Chief realizing what he's going through, and seeing Cliff in despair, despondent about clearly what happened, how things went bad for him in Florida, and then realizing, okay, let me adjust your intake so you can just get high and just lose yourself in this party that's going on for Danny. And so you see that empathy that the Chief has, and I guess part of that empathy is from feeling responsible, because he is responsible for what has transpired in Cliff's life. And so he's trying to, it was I guess a bonding moment for the two fathers who both are trying to have that relationship with their daughters. Cliff trying to rebuild it, the Chief trying to protect Dorothy, and so him getting the X and just the robot doing the robot. I mean, just those are just awesome, funny moments. And of course, when he sees the demon in the shadows, shadowy Mr. Evans, it was just those fun moments about Cliff, but yet, but then when he has his interactions with Crazy Jane or Hammerhead, whichever manifestation she was, you still have those fun moments of the two characters interacting. So
yeah, which leads us to Jane, where again they lead us. We have a great moment at the beginning of the episode where Cliff encounters the painter, who is now above ground, and he breaks her apart because she's just a painter, and you see all of this self-doubt and this unknowing, and you start to understand why Jane was in control for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the cracks in these other personalities who will surface but not be long term. And I thought that was really interesting, and their whole conversation can extend to all of these characters who are stuck or feel stuck given their abilities and what was taken away from them, and just the whole situation in and of itself, especially Dorothy, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I like that, and then how she goes through some new we see some new faces, but ultimately Hammerhead comes up and to protect the girl, and which is a driving point in her pathos, in Jane's pathos, because it's all about that little girl who was abused, and how do we protect her. And that's why all of these altars have been created. It's because it's a defense mechanism. And so I thought that whole connection made complete sense. And I'm really glad that they decided that she would kill the baby.
Yeah.
Oh, Hammerhead. Who also, it says something, because they're the exact voices who told her that her weakness is Niles, is this team, is this other family.
Right.
And those are the very people who then Hammerhead had to turn around and ultimately save.
Right. And having to save them, and then realizing, oh, to your point, this is why Jane is the primary.
Right. There's a reason.
Yeah.
And so, and we're going to get more of that, which I can't wait to see Baby Doll, because she's going to become BFFs with Dorothy. Or will she?
Or will she?
Or will she? Because Dorothy also has a lot going on in her head, a lot of temptation, and we start to hear Candlemaker's voice increase, which leads me to question.
Yeah.
Danny held on to Dorothy for so long. Not a problem. Perfectly fine. Yes, she heard all of the parties. She knew she was missing out. She made it work. She persevered. So suddenly she resurfaces and Candlemaker just says, "Oh, okay, now I'm going to start talking." I don't understand what happened between when we first meet Dorothy in the circus and Candlemaker appears to this point where for did Danny Street, was he able to muffle Candlemaker's voice or something?
I think so. I think, I guess with, well, I think we're seeing the influences, I think, of Dorothy being around the rest of the Doom Patrol, because when she was in Danny, everything was fine. You know, there was no, it was, you know, there were other was it the Danzies? Um, in the
Danielson?
street, Danisons, yeah, in the street as well. Thanks for that. Um, but you know, but she was still very innocent, because that was, you know, so basically we the chief rescues her from the circus, and then which was the last time she did hear from Candlemaker, and then she goes into Danny, and it's a very safe environment. So I don't know if there were any stressors or stimuli there that would have triggered Candlemaker.
Maybe. Maybe.
And so,
Or he figured out that the only way to get out is to convince Dorothy that she got locked up. So he's been holding this card for so long
mhm,
because he has to turn her against Niles.
right, right. And since Danny was broken and she couldn't get back in to, you know, so she couldn't put her back in the street again. Now, present day, Candlemaker's free to talk to her, and like you said, start convincing her Danny prison, and
Mhm.
and so and that innocence is, you know, because, you know, that was sort of as you said at the very beginning. I think that is very true. This episode really highlights that loss of innocence that Dorothy had,
Mhm.
and I love the way they use the whole idea of bedtime to illustrate that, because it was the nothing good happens. Daddy says nothing good ever happens after bedtime, and we've all heard that, you know, growing up. Nothing good happens after bedtime, and used to, and and each progressive hour after bedtime, how things progressively got worse, to the point where Candlemaker gets her so rattled that she ends up picking up an ice pick or whatever to basically go and destroy Danny, because she finds, you know, prisoner. And so I really think this, you know, this episode really is, like you said, a real story of lost innocence.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, Rita doesn't help
No,
much.
no, I'm glad
And
you, yeah.
she's also right there, which Rita plays a pretty important role in this episode and has been for this season, where again, a scene that in any other show you would never refer to. It just be something to set Dorothy on this path of realizing that she is older. She shouldn't have a bedtime. She shouldn't be have to follow all of Niles' rules anymore because she's 112. It's the makeup scene,
Hmm.
which but then these genius writers insert a scene later on where no, that wasn't all about Dorothy. That was about Rita too. Rita, who we know has always been obsessed with her looks, and that's why she's always suppressed her powers. And you get this great moment between her and her mom,
Hmm.
and it just mirrors everything. And then ultimately it does show you what her mom did, and how this idea that if Rita does not appear to be perfect on the outside, then she'll never have success. Her mother ingrained that into her. and ultimately her mother, and that thought is her mental block.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was great. I mean, I didn't see it coming.
No, I didn't either. I mean, that was, whenever Flex first helps her with her release, and we encounter that block. We don't see who it is. We just see some two people having sex, and we don't, until later in the episode we realize who that's actually, Rita's mother. And
Yeah.
but you're right, they did set that up very well, and it also was a good connection with both Cliff and Larry too, who are both fathers. And one of the things that stuck out to me with their interaction this episode was the line, Cliff was like, how parenting fucks everything up or whatever, and Larry was like, no, 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 no. The kids are, again, and back to this innocence. The kids are fine. It's just we are the ones who mess things up.
Yeah.
Classic. And so I like the way they connected what was going on with Rita's story, but also connecting it again back to Larry and Cliff's, and also even the Chiefs as well.
Oh yeah, he's making a lot of fatherhood mistakes, and just a lot of human mistakes, because Niles wants to be the savior, but he can't do this, honestly, until I see otherwise. If Danny won't take her back, and if she doesn't want to go back, he might have to kill her.
Yeah.
Candlemaker's too big of a threat. Too big of a threat. But we'll see what happens with Dorothy this season. We'll see. They brought, see, that line, that exchange with Cliff and Larry didn't really stand out to me because it felt very, yeah, I get it. But I like the moment between Cyborg and Larry. Because Larry needs to leave the group. He needs some time. He is too, pun intended, wrapped up in himself right now.
Yeah.
And I thought initially that this would be a very heavy Larry episode because it features the Dannysons. But then again, this show always exceeds or like says, Sarah, this is what you think's gonna happen? Yeah, right. We're gonna do this.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna repeat that. So, but I just like that moment of, why did you leave? Well, I needed to heal.
Mm-hmm.
You can't heal here. I mean, to your point about all of the distractions really feeding into Candlemaker and his plan, and Dorothy's wanting to be alive and to be a full person.
Mm-hmm.
It's very similar to what Larry's going through. I mean, Larry, he can't, he's very much like Cliff. He's just stuck, and he's confined, and he can barely feel anything, and he has all of this regret.
Yeah.
So he can't do what he needs to get done mentally in this house.
Yeah, he can't, and being trapped and being in that place, like when the party was going on and he was finally starting to free and loosen up, but he was like, at the same time, he's like, gotta stay cool, gotta stay cool, gotta stay cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then when he got hit on by his dance partner, he just completely blew it. Like, yeah, I just take off all my bandages and I kill everybody here, and just kills the moment. But he's, like you said, he's so wrapped up in himself and his own issues that he can't see the world in front of him and the things that he's missing out on. So so that was the moment with him as Cyborg was definitely another good moment in the episode. And also, as we talked about with the first 3 episodes, when would Cyborg get back with the team? And of course, this episode, he was back, and he dealing with the I don't know what to say consequences, but he's trying to make sense of what he had just experienced back in Detroit, and learn. And again, what you talked about last week, how he's always in his rightness as Cyborg, and how Mona Lee Corrupt calls him out on it and talks about how everybody has a past and everyone has a story, and helps helps Vic to hopefully helps Vic to do some introspection and see Ronnie for who she is, and not what he thinks she should be or how she should act or whatever when they get back together.
Any final thoughts about Doom Patrol?
Just one thing about Mona Lee Corrupt that's another thing that really stood out with me in the episode, and just how the show how comic book shows, when they're done well, can be used as a way as like a teachable moment where or deal with a very contemporary issue, and I'm glad that they didn't like hide on the issue of transgender individuals being murdered, and I mean and how Danny was a safe place, but also just the hatred that people will inflict on other people just because they're different, or not because they're like them, or whatever prejudices. And so in this weirdness of a show, they still very in a way to further the story and not be all preachy, but just make it very natural. Here's who I am. Here are things that are happening right now, and we and Mona was like, I'm not going to put up with it. She called the guy out on it. So I like that aspect of the episode as well. So I mean, this show is so far, season 2 has not disappointed.
Yeah. And speaking about season 2, Stargirl, it was announced today, is getting a season 2 that will be exclusively aired on the CW. Did I get that headline right?
You got it right, unfortunately. Yeah.
I've been not minding it being on DC Universe, but that thing also I don't think happened or worked out the way WB wanted it to, but we're still getting a season 2.
Yeah.
More to come. I think it's great that last week we did not talk about Stargirl, because just so happens we had part 1 of a part 2 episode, and these parts it is really one